Our panel will be here, and we also have with us CNN crime and justice correspondent Caitlin Polantz. Caitlin, wonderful to see you, and I do want to start with you and with this birthright citizenship story first, because we just got the lengthy, we should say, written opinion from the judge in this case. What's it say?
Well, Casey, before we get to exactly what the judge writes, because he writes 38 pages here, I just tore through it, but in this case, the birthright citizenship decision by Donald Trump to put this executive order in place to end birthright citizenship, it keeps getting looked at by lower courts, and they keep saying, no, this just isn't going to fly under the Constitution. I need to block it. What happened with the Supreme Court was they had given direction to the lower court at the end of their term, saying you can't just say that birthright citizenship, the executive order is blocked for anyone, anywhere. You have to be more specific. So the specific group here that got the relief from the court, it's babies born after February 20th of this year, and babies still to come, babies that have not been born yet. So that's the specific group. The judge today saying, though, I looked at the Supreme Court ruling. I have done my due diligence to narrow that class and certify it here in this court in New Hampshire. Judge Joseph LaPlante, he also says it wasn't a close call. Casey, here's the quote that he wrote in this 38-page order that just came out through his court. He said he has no difficulty concluding that the rapid adoption by executive order without legislation and the attending national debate of a new government policy of highly questionable constitutionality that would deny citizenship to many thousands of individuals previously granted citizenship under an indisputably longstanding policy constitutes irreparable harm. That's a lot of words by this judge to lay it out, but breaking it down, he's blocking the policy. He's saying he's doing it because it hurts a lot of people, that giving birthright citizenship to people in this country was a long-standing policy, and when the Trump administration put this in place, they did it fast, without input from Congress, without any ability to have public debate as a precursor to that executive order. And now he's saying also probably not constitutional. It is highly questionable. So that's the judge wrapping up now. Of course, his ruling is going to be paused for a short period of time, just a couple days, so that the Trump administration could appeal. We expect them to, and we expect them to appeal this all the way up again, very likely to the Supreme Court.
All right, Caitlin, very interesting. Thank you. Stand by for me. I do want to bring in our panel, CNN legal analyst Elliot Williams, CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel, CNN political commentator Xochitl Hinojosa, and former Republican governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker. Welcome to all of you. Thank you all for being here. Elliot, let me start with you just on the legal piece of this. This is, the Supreme Court said no nationwide injunctions from a single judge, but if there's a class action lawsuit, that group of people is entitled to nationwide relief, functionally. So this judge in New Hampshire has gone ahead and said, okay, there is a protected class here. Is this, do you think, how the Supreme Court intended this to play out, essentially? I mean, because they've got a very tough needle to thread with President Trump. They were clearly trying to give him a win on the injunctions thing, but this is a really tricky issue.
This is 100% what the Supreme Court willed into existence. They said it in an oral argument. They said it in their opinion, and it has now played out. They were abundantly clear about this. And before anybody starts with arguments about how popular Donald Trump is and how judges are undermining his actions, this is what the courts wanted. The Supreme Court said a single judge can't issue an injunction against one party that applies to other parties around the country, but come together as a class, certify yourself as a class, ask a court to form a class action. If we want, we can talk about what it takes to become a class. I don't think you want to hear that. But the simple fact is, you don't want to hear
I appreciate your discretion.
Commonality, numerosity, typically, and adequacy of joinder. But no, you don't want that. But no, needless to say, I still did it. But needless to say, the court said, form a class. Maybe it's a nationwide class, and go ahead and then file it again in court. And they did that. Notably, the judge did not apply the parents to the class. So it's not a willy-nilly application of this policy.
Oh, that's interesting.
To everybody,
okay.
No, it's just limited to children, future and present children, as of, I believe, is February 10th or February 20th, the day that it did it. So it's somewhat narrow and limited, and what the Supreme Court invited. We need to make that clear. A conservative Supreme Court made this happen.
Well, and Jamie Gangel, I mean, there are obviously instances where people would file lawsuits in court, and you saw various groups in Washington doing this around a host of political issues. Abortion is a good example, right, where states would make different laws and a single injunction in a single state would apply nationwide. We can obviously debate whether that's good or not good, but this question of birthright citizenship is not one for the states in the way that other questions might be, right? I mean, the idea that different rules apply in terms of being an American citizen versus in terms of what state you're born in would be remarkable.
Can you just imagine, Elliot, I think we talked about this when the Supreme Court case first came up, if in Texas you could have birthright, but you couldn't in Arizona or I'm picking the states here and there, but what if we had a country where in a bunch of red states you had one situation?
Well, and then what happens when you move to another state, et cetera, right?
If you're in Pennsylvania, a child is born in Pennsylvania, crosses the border into the state of New Jersey, or their parents do. They have different sets of laws regarding their citizenship, regardless of what anybody thinks about what's right. That is not workable in a country where everybody ought to be entitled to the same federal laws.
And just quickly, in addition to the class